Welcome back to Dr. Leo 6's channel. The aim of this channel is to learn multiple languages simultaneously, using a variety of methods. Today, by analyzing international affairs and exploring the U.S.-Iran war from the perspective of the China world, we will learn two Chinese words: Xiāohào战, war of attrition; Lājù战, Seesaw Battle.
You know that feeling when you try to fix a dripping pipe under the kitchen sink?
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic trap.
Right. Like you go in there, the wrench slips, a valve snaps, and suddenly your 5-minute DIY fix costs you thousands of dollars in water damage.
Yeah, and half your kitchen floor is ruined.
Exactly. Well, what happens when a superpower tries a quick fix on the global stage?
It's a lot more expensive than a kitchen floor.
It really is. Today we're looking at how a shattered expectation of a swift military victory didn't just break the geopolitical pipes, so to speak. It directly caused the inflation that's draining your bank account at the grocery store right now.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a really fascinating look at the recent United States and Iran conflict, but we're doing it through a very specific lens today. We're looking at how Chinese media outlets are analyzing this exact situation.
And we're tackling this analysis with a twist, right?
Yeah.
This is tailored specifically for you, the listener, who might just be beginning to learn the Chinese language and who wants to understand how these massive geopolitical events actually translate into tangible impacts on the global economy.
Because it's not just abstract stuff.
No, not at all. Most importantly, we're going to trace the line from a missile strike halfway across the world directly to the livelihood of ordinary people and ultimately to your own wallet.
Yeah, but before we jump into the deep end here, just a quick but essential note for you. The material we are analyzing today touches on some highly sensitive political and military issues involving multiple nations.
Very sensitive, yeah.
So, as your guides on this deep dive, our job is strictly and impartially to report the Chinese media's narrative exactly as it's presented in the sources. We are not taking sides. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints.
Right. Our mission is purely to understand the perspective being presented in these articles and just extract the underlying economic mechanics from it.
Exactly. We are dissecting the vocabulary and the logic of this specific media landscape, really, to see what it reveals about modern warfare and global economics.
Yeah, the words they use are very intentional.
Okay, let's unpack this because, using language learning as a sort of backdoor into understanding global economics is honestly one of my favorite things to do.
That's a great approach.
Right. The specific words a culture chooses to describe an event, they often strip away all that diplomatic spin. They tell you exactly what is happening on the ground.
Yeah, vocabulary is almost like a diagnostic tool. It reveals their underlying assessment of the whole situation.
Totally.
So to understand how this conflict evolved into such a massive global economic burden, we first have to look at the terminology the Chinese media is actually using to define the nature of the fight.
And the words they've settled on are pretty revealing.
They are. They explain perfectly why the costs spiraled completely out of control.
Well, let's look at the first key term. The Chinese media repeatedly refers to this conflict as a war of attrition.
Right.
And for our beginner language learner, the pinyin for this is Xiāohào.
Xiāohào, yeah.
So if we break that down phonetically, the first part, Xiāohào, generally means to consume, to deplete, or to, wear something down over a long period.
Like slowly grinding it down.
Exactly. And zhàn simply means war or battle. So it's a consuming war, a war of depletion.
What's fascinating here is how that pairs with the second prevailing term they use, which is Seesaw Battle.
A seesaw battle.
Yeah. The pinyin is Lājù zhàn, and Lājù translates literally to the pulling of a saw.
Oh, like a two-man saw.
Exactly. Picture a large two-man crosscut saw used to, cut down a giant tree. You pull it back, the other person pulls it forth, back and forth.
It's just constant motion.
Right, but there is no rapid forward progress.
Yeah.
You're just locked in this repetitive grinding and physically exhausting motion.
That sounds miserable. So, the obvious question is, why are these terms dominating the analysis?
Well, the narrative points directly back to that shattered expectation of a quick fix that you mentioned earlier.
Right, the plumbing disaster.
Yeah. In the build-up to the brief confrontation in mid-2025, the U.S. and Israeli alliance, they seem to operate on this assumption of a rapid resolution.
They thought they'd be in and out.
Basically. The prevailing thought was that high-intensity precision airstrikes, could rapidly dismantle Iran's defenses, or, at the very least, fundamentally shake the foundations of the regime over a matter of weeks.
Because the military doctrine they were leaning on is built entirely around overwhelming technological superiority.
Exactly. The idea is to go in, execute a highly technical strike that blinds the adversary's radar, cripples their command centers, and then you just dictate the terms of the aftermath.
Before the adversary can even regroup.
Exactly. It's the geopolitical equivalent of walking up to that sink with a wrench and a 5-minute timer.
Right. But the reality on the ground defied that timeline completely.
Completely.
The analysis highlights that Iran demonstrated a level of what they call wartime resilience that wildly exceeded those initial expectations.
Yeah, the regime's foundations did not crumble.
No, they didn't. Instead, the conflict escalated, it mutated, and it dragged multiple surrounding nations into this grinding stalemate with no discernible exit strategy.
Right, and by officially categorizing this as a Xiāohào, a war of attrition, the Chinese media is signaling that the era of the swift, decisive victory in this theater, it's just fundamentally over.
It's gone.
Yeah, it marks a shift from a sprint to a grueling marathon. And, a sprint requires a burst of energy, but a marathon requires the complete mobilization and potential exhaustion of your entire national reserve.
Gosh, when I try to visualize a Lājù, that Seesaw Battle, I actually think of a neighborhood tug of war.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. Imagine two teams lining up. Everyone assumes it's going to be a quick test of strength, 5 minutes tops.
Everyone's cheering.
Exactly. But nobody gives an inch. 5 minutes turns into an hour, then 2 hours.
Oh, man.
Nobody is crossing the center line to win. Everyone is just getting severe rope burn. Muscles are tearing, but everyone is too stubborn, or maybe their pride is too invested to just drop the rope.
Right. And the tragedy of that tug-of-war scenario is the illusion of activity versus actual achievement.
Yes.
But both sides are expending maximum energy. They're burning through their resources, yet neither side is actually changing their geographic or strategic position.
We're stuck.
Yeah, all that energy is being dumped into a void.
So, okay, we've established that the government essentially took out a high-interest credit card loan to fund this geopolitical tug of war. And now they are handing the bill to the citizens.
Yes, the citizens always pay.
Right. And you can only do that for so long before the people holding the bill start to revolt. Let's look at how this economic pressure is fracturing both countries from the inside.
Because we are moving from the military battlefield straight to the economic battlefield here.
Exactly. Specifically, how does a geopolitical Lājù directly reach its hands into the listener's pocket?
Well, holding on to that rope requires constant funding. The Chinese media identifies the U.S. approach as a war business model that is basically morphed into a financial black hole.
A black hole.
Yeah. The U.S. Department of Defense required tens of billions of dollars in emergency funding just to cover the immediate upfront costs of the expanded Iran conflict.
Wait, I need to stop you there for a second.
Sure.
Because the Department of Defense already has a massive, almost incomprehensible baseline budget. We hear numbers like tens of billions and our eyes just glaze over.
Yeah. It's hard to conceptualize.
Right.
Yeah.
So why does an extra $50 billion for missile defense and carrier deployments in the Middle East suddenly mean I am paying $1 more for a gallon of gas in Ohio? How does that math actually work?
That is the crucial disconnect we need to bridge here. It is really easy to view military budgets as monopoly money that just lives purely in congressional hearing rooms.
Exactly.
But the mechanism connecting a missile launch to your local gas pump is the global supply chain. Specifically, it operates through risk and insurance.
Oh, insurance. Okay.
Right. When a volatile oil-rich region gets locked into a stalemate, the shipping lanes become hazardous. The Strait of Hormuz, for example, is a critical bottleneck.
So ships can't get through easily.
Right. Or if they do, the underwriters in London who insure those massive cargo ships and oil tankers, they panic.
I mean, understandably.
Sure. They look at the risk of a missile hitting a commercial vessel, and they multiply the insurance premiums by a factor of 10.
Wait, a factor of 10?
Yeah, the rates absolutely skyrocket. And the shipping companies, they don't just absorb that loss out of the goodness of their hearts.
No, of course not.
They pass the cost of that insurance directly on to the buyers of the oil. So suddenly, the base price of a barrel of oil spikes on the global market.
Wow. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because oil isn't just used for gasoline in your car. It's literally the lifeblood of global logistics.
It runs everything.
Yeah. Oil dictates the cost of transporting a carton of eggs to your supermarket. It dictates the cost of the plastic packaging wrapped around your consumer goods. It dictates the cost of manufacturing the clothes you wear.
Everything is touched by it.
Right. And the Chinese media has a specific label for this cascading effect, don't they?
They do. They call it a hyper-depletion of capital and resources.
Hyper-depletion.
Yeah. The state depletes its treasury to fund the military, which triggers regional instability, which spikes global logistics costs, which ultimately lands on your grocery receipt as soaring inflation.
That's wild, and the numbers attached to this are just staggering. The analysis points out that American and global consumers have been saddled with hundreds of billions of dollars in extra fuel and daily living costs.
Hundreds of billions.
Yeah, so the military operation cost tens of billions in immediate defense spending. But the secondary effect, the global inflation, costs the everyday consumer hundreds of billions.
It's exponential.
Huh.
The collateral economic damage to the global working and middle class completely dwarfs the immediate military expenditure.
Wow.
And that is the insidious nature of a Xiāohào zhàn. It isn't just grinding down the adversary's military assets. It is literally grinding down the purchasing power of ordinary families who are just trying to heat their homes and drive to work.
It's basically an invisible tax. The public is essentially subsidizing a foreign conflict every single time they buy groceries.
Precisely. Modern warfare is just deeply interconnected. The hyperdepletion of capital, it isn't some abstract economic theory debated by scholars in a university.
Right.
It is the mathematical reality of your shrinking paycheck. An extended deployment thousands of miles away directly dictates the price of your morning coffee.
But, you know, the economic burden we just walked through, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You don't just extract hundreds of billions of dollars from the working class and expect society to just hum along as usual.
No, society fractures.
Exactly. Let's look at how this economic pressure is causing immense internal exhaustion and turmoil for the ordinary citizens living inside both of the primary nations involved.
Yeah.
The narrative highlights what they call a two-way drain in politics and strategy.
And exploring how this dual drain affects both sides, it really reveals why a war of attrition is uniquely destructive to the domestic fabric of a nation.
Yeah, let's examine the U.S. side first, according to the media analysis.
Okay, so there's a profound internal contradiction at play here. The military-industrial complex, the defense contractors manufacturing the munitions and supplying the logistics,
Right.
they reap massive profits from a prolonged conflict.
They are heavily incentivized by the Lājù. The longer that saw goes back and forth, the more blades they get to sell.
Exactly. But while those profits concentrate at the very top of the defense sector, the broader domestic economy is groaning under the weight of the inflation we just discussed.
Yeah, everyday people are struggling.
Right. And this economic pain translates directly into severe domestic political polarization. The friction becomes immense. We're actively seeing the U.S. Senate frequently introducing and passing resolutions attempting to curb the president's war powers.
And I want to clarify what that actually means for a second, because a Senate resolution, it sort of sounds like a polite memo.
Right. It sounds very procedural.
Yeah, but this is actually a structural fight between branches of government. It indicates that the constituents back home, the people actually paying that invisible tax at the grocery store, are so angry and exhausted by the endless entanglement that their representatives are actively trying to legally restrain the commander-in-chief.
It is a flashing red indicator of deep internal division regarding the strategic direction of the country.
It really is.
A state cannot project sustained power outward when its domestic foundation is actively fracturing over the cost of that projection.
Right.
America's international strategic credibility is eroded because allies and adversaries alike can see the domestic political turmoil limiting the nation's endurance.
They see the cracks in the foundation.
Exactly.
So, okay, we have the U.S. dealing with political polarization and inflation, but if we pivot to look at the Iranian side, the internal turmoil is arguably even more acute, and the cost to the ordinary citizen is just devastating.
Horrific, yes.
Yes. The analysis reminds us of the critical timing of this conflict. This war erupted during the largest anti-government protests in Iran since 1979.
Yeah, that timing is absolutely crucial. The societal baseline in Iran was already stretched to the absolute breaking point before the conflict even escalated.
It was already a powder keg.
Yes, the economy was incredibly fragile, and public livelihoods were heavily compromised by years of sanctions and internal mismanagement.
Right.
And the U.S. and Israel seemingly calculated that applying extreme external military pressure would be the final catalyst needed to collapse that fragile system entirely.
But as we mentioned, the regime displayed that unexpected wartime resilience. However, the regime's survival does not mean the citizens are fine.
Not at all.
The Chinese media points out that ordinary Iranians are enduring a horrific dual exhaustion. Can we dive into what that actually looks like on the streets of Tehran or Isfahan?
Yeah, so dual exhaustion means facing crushing pressure from two opposing directions simultaneously.
Oh.
Externally, the civilian population is dealing with punishing military strikes. They are dealing with destroyed infrastructure, power grid failures, and just the physical terror of a high-tech aerial bombardment.
Which is terrifying on its own.
Right, but internally, they're dealing with the suppression of their own anti-government protests, massive political crackdowns, and a shattered economy where basic goods require severe wartime rationing.
Wow. So what does this all mean? When you pull back and look at the source material comprehensively, you see this tragic, symmetrical suffering.
Symmetrical is a good word for it.
Right. On one end of the spectrum, you have a concentrated military-industrial complex generating immense wealth from the continuation of the stalemate. But on the other end, you have the ordinary citizens in both the United States and Iran bearing the absolute brunt of the devastation.
Yeah.
You have eroded economies, fractured political systems, and fragile livelihoods just being ground into dust.
And this raises what is perhaps the most critical question of this entire geopolitical analysis. How can any nation, regardless of its military technology or its geographic size, successfully sustain a Lājù externally when its own citizens are facing such profound economic and political exhaustion internally?
It's impossible. It's like trying to win that neighborhood tug of war when half of your own team is actively collapsing from dehydration.
Yeah.
And the other half is loudly arguing about whether they should even be holding the rope in the first place. The sheer physics of it means it just isn't sustainable.
It isn't. The paradox of modern attrition warfare is that a state attempts to project strength outward by actively cannibalizing its own internal stability.
Cannibalizing itself. Wow.
Yeah, the military units might hold the line on the map, but the domestic society supporting those units is actively crumbling under the weight of inflation, resource depletion, and political discord.
Which brings us to the core takeaway from the Chinese media narrative we've been exploring today. When you hear the term Xiāohào, war of attrition, it is exactly what the characters imply.
Yes, it is.
It is a scenario that is impossible to win quickly, incredibly difficult to win outright, exorbitantly expensive, and brutally costly for the societies involved.
Right, because a surgical strike implies precision and containment. A war of attrition is a comprehensive head-to-head draining of military, economic, and domestic political capital.
It drains everything.
Yeah. Whether a society is experiencing extreme military strikes and violent internal protests, or whether a society is experiencing severe inflation, political polarization, and the hyper-depletion of capital, the fundamental mechanic of the suffering is identical.
Yeah. When governments lock horns in an unwinnable seesaw battle, the diplomatic press releases, they always focus on strategy. But the reality is that the ordinary person, the everyday consumer just trying to fill up their gas tank, buy groceries, and care for their family, is the one who ultimately pays the heaviest price.
The sky-high bills of geopolitical maneuvering are always settled by the working class.
Always. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to ponder on your own.
Yeah, something to think about.
We have traced the path of modern conflict today. We've seen how easily a promised quick victory evolves into an unwinnable, grinding seesaw battle. And we've detailed exactly how these battles directly and aggressively drain your wallet through massive global inflation, supply chain bottlenecks, and resource depletion.
Right, because the economic reality of global conflict is no longer a distant, abstract concept confined to the evening news. It is an immediate daily tax on your survival.
So if this is the new reality of the global stage, if the cost of a foreign entanglement is paid directly by you at your local grocery store checkout line, how might that harsh economic reality change the way ordinary people vote?
It's a great question.
How might it change the way you advocate for your country's foreign policy in the future? If you know that trying to forcefully tighten a single geopolitical bolt is going to flood your entire economic house and drain your family's savings, do you still hand the wrench to your leaders without asking questions? Think about it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
That concludes today's podcast. Through our analysis of international affairs and news from the China world, we have learnt 2 Chinese words: Xiāohào, war of attrition; Lājù, seesaw battle. We hope that by continually building on our knowledge, we can keep learning and improving, and embrace the diversity of the world and its cultures. Please do subscribe to Dr. Leo 6 Multilingual Learning Channel. Thank you.